There's a specific moment that happens when you finally cross the six-figure mark. You've been chasing this number for years. It was the North Star your parents talked about, the symbol of making it in the American middle class. But as you sit there looking at that $100,000 in your high-yield savings account or your brokerage firm, the choir doesn't sing. In fact, if you're like most people, you feel a weird, creeping sense of ... nothing. My name is Zenvest, and today we're talking about the 7 things you absolutely must do once you have $100,000 saved. Because the truth is, $100,000 in 2026 is a psychological minefield. It is the exact salary and savings level where the math of working hard starts to collapse under its own weight. And if you don't pivot your strategy right now, you aren't just leaving money on the table, you're actively walking into a trap. 1. Kill the arrival illusion. The first thing you have to do is realize that $100,000 is not a finish line. It is a new baseline. We have to be honest about the math. In 1980, $100,000 was a fortune. But today, that same $100,000 has to purchase $36,000 in 1980, ***. If you feel like you should be rich but you're still stressed about basic expenses, it's not because you're failing. It's because the wallpaper came off the lounge and we all realized the room was smaller than we remembered. The arrival illusion is what kills most six-figure savers. You think you've made it, so you let your guard down. But the moment you cross into this territory, you hit the phase-out zone. The federal government has a mental model where $100,000 is wealthy. So you lose the student loan interest deduction, the American Opportunity Tax Credit, and potentially the traditional IRA deduction if you have a 401k at work. The system has decided you are rich, even if your bank account didn't get the memo. Your first job at $100,000 is to stay humble and realize that the goal isn't the number. It's the margin between what you earn and what you spend. Asterisk 2. Audit your drywall net worth if you're sitting on $100,000. I need you to do a liquidity audit. Most people in their mid-40s have a net worth of about $247,000, but roughly 60% to 70% of that is locked inside their house. You cannot eat home equity. You cannot pay the electric bill with a deed. If your $100,000 is mostly drywall, you are still financially fragile. You are house rich and life poor. Real wealth is what you don't see, the liquid assets that can actually move when you need them to. Once you hit $100,000, you need to ensure a significant portion of that is in high-yield savings or diversified index funds. Why? Because liquidity gives you a liquidity premium, the ability to strike when a once-in-a-decade investment opportunity comes along, while everyone else has their money locked in a cage. 3. Transition from labor to machine. This is the most important mechanical shift. Charlie Munger famously said, "The first $100,000 is a bitch, but you have to do it." Here is why he said that. When you're saving your first $100,000, your contributions do about 81% of the work, while your returns only do 19%. You are the engine. But right around the $100,000 mark, the math flips. Around a $171,000 balance, your annual investment returns start beating your annual contributions. Your money has finally found a job, and it's a better job than yours. It doesn't take sick days, and it works 24/7. Once you hit $100,000, your job changes from working for money to protecting the machine. You stop trying to beat the market, and you start letting a boring index fund do the heavy lifting. At a 7% real return, $100,000 grows to over $1 million in about 34 years, even if you never add another dollar. That is the power of the machine. 4. Install a couch guilt. Internal locus of control. There is a documented psychological profile of people who quietly escape the rat race. It involves an internal locus of control, the belief that your outcomes are determined by your actions, not your circumstances. When you have $100,000, you will be tempted to buy the couch. You'll want the $3,400 espresso machine or a new truck because your neighbor got one. Psychologists call this social comparison, and it's software written in your brain to make you feel like standing still is losing. The people who actually stay wealthy are the ones who keep what I call couch guilt. They are the ones who hit $100K and still feel a little weird about big spending because they remember the $0 days. Ronald Reed, a janitor who died with $8 million, wore a khaki jacket held together with a safety pin. He didn't perform wealth. He built it. Once you have $100,000, your biggest enemy isn't the stock market, it's your own desire to show people you have $100,000. 5. Weaponize your credit mix. Now that you have capital, you need to understand the system. Some people think paying cash for everything is the ultimate grown-up move. They slide a $35,000 check across the desk for a car and walk out feeling like kings. Here's what Zenvest wants you to know. That check just cost you money. If you could have financed at a lower rate, then your savings earn. If a dealership offers 0% or low-rate financing, and your high-yield savings account is paying 4%, paying cash is no longer responsibilities, leaving money on the table. Furthermore, the FICO algorithm rewards credit mix, having both revolving credit and installment loans. The person who pays cash for everything often ends up with a lower credit score, which means when they buy a house, they get a higher interest rate that costs them thousands. Once you have $100,000, stop playing the cash is king game and start playing the math is king game. 6. Solve for coastfire, not fatfire. The internet loves to talk about fatfire, retiring with millions, and a yacht. But for most of you, the real goal should be coastfire. Coastfire is the moment your current savings, given enough time to compound, will cover your retirement without you ever adding another cent. If you're 41 and you have $250,000 saved at a 7% return, that grows to $1.3 million by age 65. Once you have $100,000, you are well on your way to that freedom threshold. This is the time to check your price-to-rent ratio in your city. If you live in a city where it's over 25, stop trying to buy a house just because you have the down payment. The math is yelling at you to rent and invest the difference. $1 second invested in the market while you rent a modest apartment can often make you much richer over a decade than buying drywall in a broken market. 7. Decouple your identity from your income finally. And this is the psychological part. Money stops being able to pull you out of misery at $100,000 a year. Research shows that for the least happy 20% of people, well-being plateaus at around $100,000 a year. Above that, more money doesn't buy more joy for them. If you have $100,000 and you're still dreading Monday morning, more money is not the answer. You have crossed the threshold where more was ever going to be the solution. The people who quietly escape the rat race are the ones who decoupled their identity from their job title at the $100,000 mark. They realized that the cage of the corporate world is real, but it's just upholstered in nicer fabric once you get a raise. Once you have $100,000, you have enough to stop performing for a group you don't even like. You can start choosing how to spend your life energy instead of just trading it for a bigger number. Asterisk at the end of the day. There are two people sitting in their kitchens this morning. One has $100,000 and is terrified it's not enough because they're comparing themselves to others. The other has $100,000 and knows they have enough to sleep through the night like it's a civil right. The difference isn't the math. It's the story they tell themselves about what money is for. If you have $100,000, congratulations. You've done the bitch of a job that most Americans will never finish. Now, stop running the race they designed for you and start building the life you actually want. If this video helped you run the numbers, hit subscribe. Zenvest. We'll see you on the next one.